Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of 5 Minutes from Flinders. Once upon a time, it didn't actually look like this. It is home to Captain James Cook's. And today I'm going to take you on an amazing journey back in time, but also show you this great little spot that you can find, which is only 5 minutes away, for a picnic in the city. Amazing.
I am heartily glad to see you.
If you do have a special someone, I'd highly suggest you bring them along. Hundreds and hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars worth of gold. And it was all housed in the vaults of this building. I am sitting in God knows whose chair this is, where all the gold was kept. The Sydney-Melbourne rivalry thing, that's quite interesting. The vaults. Oh, this is what we're looking for. To do this, you're going to need a little Mikey card. If you're not quite sure how to get a Mikey, I've got a video for you. And you're going to jump on the train out the front of Flinders Street Station. Let's go. Well, I got on the wrong tram, which means I have to do a short little walk. It's probably only 5 minutes away up to where I'm going to take you. But today's episode, 5 Minutes from Flinders, we're going to check out some of the Melbourne's historic buildings, some of the parklands within the inner city area of Melbourne. But specifically, I'm going to take you up to the Treasury Building and show you this amazing museum, which is free and it's open nearly every day of the year. So come on, let's go. Let's go check it out and let's go learn some more about Melbourne's history and some great things to do that are within 5 minutes from Flinders Street Station. I can't believe I got on the wrong tram. I caught the wrong tram. I caught the number 5 tram out the front of Flinders Street Station on Flinders Street. The tram you need to catch is either number 35 or the number 75. And you're going to go towards Bridge Road. That's the way you're going to head towards, via Bridge Road. And you're going to get off at Spring Street tram stop on Flinders Street. From there, you're just going to go across the road and we have arrived at our first location. It's not far at all. So 5 minutes from Flinders. And just like that, we have arrived in Treasury Gardens. Now, Treasury Gardens is one of the 5 main gardens that make up the main gardens within Melbourne and within the CBD. And Treasury Gardens sits right next door to our famous Treasury Building, or it's known as the Old Treasury Building. And this has an amazing history and it also has a free museum, which I'm going to take you through today. Because I think if you come and visit Melbourne, you really do need to come and check out these old historic buildings and just see what Melbourne was kind of like back in the 1800s when Melbourne was being established. But these gardens here, Treasury Gardens, these are absolutely stunning. They're so relaxing. It's just serene and it is used by everyone and they are here for everyone to be used. They sit on the corner of Flinders Street and Spring Street and across the road from another gardens called Treasury Gardens. Now, as you can see, there are people just everywhere and people come in here and they exercise, they have lunch on their lunch break, they just come and have a snooze if they want to, or they just sit underneath the trees and read a book. It really is a great place to come and relax, or they come and take videos like I'm doing today. But the history of the gardens is what's really interesting. So where I'm standing now is smack bang in the middle of Treasury Gardens. Behind me, you might be able to see over the back here, we've got some of our Treasury buildings and Parliament buildings. And this is at the top of Melbourne on Spring Street. And then we've come down to, into this area, which is, as I said, known as Treasury Gardens. But once upon a time, it didn't actually look like this. Traditionally, this was Indigenous land. This is the Wurundjeri people land, and I believe, well, I've been told, it was prime hunting land for those that lived in this area. In fact, Melbourne, again, as I've been told, was kind of known as the land of abundance. It was full of amazing things that helped supply the way of life for the Indigenous people. Treasury Gardens here, this was actually designed in the 1860s, once Melbourne was really starting to boom during the gold rush. You see, we had the gold rush start in about 1851. 9 years later, the population just exploded, and more people were coming into Melbourne. Therefore, the city of Melbourne itself started to expand and grow, and there was more need for, I guess, these parklands where people could come and have some R&R. So I guess you could think of Treasury Gardens as almost like a green lung, a green place where people could come and relax during the building of Melbourne in the gold rush era. And it is absolutely wonderful. Once upon a time, it was just all thick bushland and scrubland, full of kangaroos and emus and wombats and possums and all types of Australian animals. And it's just so lovely to be here today. And it's a great spot. So what you could do, you could go to the museum at the Treasury Building, could bring a packed lunch, and this could be a spot for you to come and have a picnic with your friends or by yourself, and you can just enjoy being in the gardens. Just across the street from Treasury Gardens, we have Fitzroy Gardens. Now, Fitzroy Gardens was actually designed back in 1848, so about 12 years before Treasury Gardens was actually designed. Now, this is a little strange because we had the city over here to our right. We just had all this shrubland and bushland, which was, or is now, Treasury Gardens. But over on the left-hand side where Fitzroy Gardens is, over the back, we've got the historic suburb of East Melbourne, where homes were starting to be built in the early stages of Melbourne's development. We're talking 1830s, 1840s, 1850s. So this parkland, Fitzroy Gardens, really was there and built and designed in an English style for those free settlers that came out from England and bought some land and built their homes up in the East Melbourne suburb. Today, as I stand here, it is, again, absolutely stunning, and spring is a wonderful time to come and check it out. You really can just come along here and just enjoy the time. In fact, you find that a lot of people from Melbourne, they really do love these gardens. It really is a big part of their lives, especially if you live around here or you work around here. But what's really interesting about Fitzroy Gardens is it is home to Captain James Cook's childhood cottage from England. This is what I want to show you. You get down here, Fitzroy Gardens, you get to Cook's Cottage, which you can see behind me here, but you have to buy a ticket first, and the tickets cost $7.70 for adults, and you buy them at the information booth that you can see behind me here. This is open every day of the year except Christmas Day, open from 10 to 4, and they have volunteers dressed up in costume of what it was like back in the 1800s who will help you explore the cottage itself. Now, the cottage isn't very large, but it is a great little monument here in Melbourne that dates back to the 1700s. Now, Captain James Cook, his story is quite a complex story and it has a lot of controversy with it. I'm not going to cover the story, that can be something for another time, but I'm going to cover the cottage here. So the cottage itself is the actual real cottage from Captain James Cook's childhood. You see, what they did back in the 1930s is they went and dismantled it brick by brick in England and transported it out here to Australia and rebuilt it in Fitzroy Gardens. Isn't that just amazing? So let's go inside and have a quick look. So the first thing you notice when you come in is how low the ceilings are. This really is a small cottage, and the story is absolutely amazing.
Friend, I am heartily glad to see you. My name is Grace, and I welcome thou to Cook's Cottage. From husband's carving above the front door, thou may see we've dwelled here since the year of 1755. The very same year, our second child, James, took his leave for the Royal Navy.
So it is a two-storey cottage, and you can go up the stairs to see the second level.
Before rest, Charles places fine glass watering pans in our beds for the purpose to not suffer chill night, and rise refreshed on tomorrow, or under the flicker of our candle. Our bedding is plump with straw and feather.
This really is a must-see and do here in Melbourne, and it's so close to the city. Let's go and check out the gardens, because the gardens are beautiful. One of the best things around here is there's just all these tiny little pathways that you can just really come and explore the gardens, and it is kind of romantic. So if you do have a special someone, I'd highly suggest you bring them along and come for a walk through the gardens and hold their hand and even sneak a little kiss. There's so much to do here. So we need to keep going. We're going to continue on our journey, but there's one more thing I want to show you that is located here in Fitzroy Gardens. So let's go check that out now. And once you've finished over at Captain James Cook's cottage, you can come over here, just a short 50-metre walk from the cottage to the Melbourne Conservatory inside Fitzroy Gardens. And at the moment here in spring, it is stunning. It is full of native Australian flowers that just smell amazing. And I'm seeing colours and flowers I've never actually seen before. And this is open to the public all year round. And it's only 50 metres away from Captain Cook's cottage in Fitzroy Gardens. Check this out. And this place is very much a place you'd come and enjoy the seasons. Oh, and it's free for you to come and explore. Put it on your list. But let's keep going. Now, something that you just would not expect to see in the middle of Fitzroy Gardens is this amazing little miniature Tudor village that you can see behind me. This was donated from the people in England to the city of Melbourne in appreciation for helping them out during the food shortage just after World War II. See, Victoria, we sent a whole heap of food over to England, and to say thank you, the lovely people over there sent us this amazing little miniature Tudor village. And it is in the centre of Fitzroy Gardens. You really do need to come check it out. As you stroll around Fitzroy Gardens and Treasury Gardens, you come across these interesting little plaques that give you a real snapshot of the history here in Melbourne, specifically around the Fitzroy Gardens. And it is a really great way to see what life was like back in the 1800s, 1900s, when Melbourne was really finding its feet as a city and a destination. Once you finish down at Treasury Gardens or down at Fitzroy Gardens, just a quick short walk, like 3-minute walk up towards Spring Street, and it's going to bring you to the Old Treasury Building. Now, the Old Treasury Building is an amazing building built back in the 1800s by a young guy by the name of J.J. Clark. John James, his name was. What's interesting about him is he was only 19 when he built this amazing structure. It is huge, it is stunning, and it is the epitome of Melbourne in the gold rush. So, J.J. Clark, he was born in Scotland, moved out to Australia when he was 14, and then started working for the civil service in the architect sort of department. Now, what was really happening in Melbourne at the time when we had the gold rush, there wasn't a lot of skill sets of architects. So he got a job straight away at the age of 14 and very quickly moved up the ranks because he was actually quite good at his job. He then started the design of this building. It is an Italian Renaissance style building at the end of Melbourne. It's stunning. I can't think of another word. It really is. And it's got a museum for you to go and explore. So I'm going to take you through the museum now and let's learn a little bit about the gold rush history, because the original purpose of this building was to house all of the gold and the finances, hence the Treasury, that was found in Victoria at the time. So we're talking gold rush, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of millions, probably billions of dollars worth of gold. And it was all housed in the vaults of this building. I am sitting in God knows whose chair this is or who has sat, what famous bottoms have been in this chair, but I am inside the Treasury Building in one of the glorious rooms that are on display here, and it is open for everyone to come and explore. This is a free museum at the end of Collins Street. It is wonderful and you truly must come and check this out. In fact, each room that you walk through is almost like its own mini museum. It tells the story and the history of Melbourne all the way back from the 1800s, like 1835, up until modern day Melbourne today in 2024. But what I want to go check out is where all the gold was kept. So let's go and check out those vaults. Now, you're probably aware of the fierce rivalry that exists between Sydney and Melbourne. Now, this has always been a part of the Australian landscape, and it's quite interesting because if you ask people from Melbourne what the people from Sydney are like, you'll get a certain answer, and vice versa. Now, what's really interesting is the federal government decided back in the 1900s, right? Because this rivalry was so fierce, they decided we're going to build a capital city in the middle, because there was this fight over who was going to be the capital city. Is it going to be Melbourne or is it going to be Sydney? So to settle it, they said, right, we're going to do it in the middle of both these cities. And that's where Canberra came from. Up until Canberra became the capital city, Parliament actually sat in Melbourne. So from 1901, Australia's first Parliament was held here in Melbourne, and some amazing laws got passed while it was Parliament here in Australia, including we had women's suffrage, old age and invalid pensions, a minimum wage for men, an arbitration court to settle industrial disputes, and a maternity allowance. These were all introduced before World War I. But there were other less progressive laws that were introduced, including the horrible Immigration Restriction Act in 1901. The whole idea of this law was basically to limit the non-white immigration to Australia, particularly the Asians. And by 1947, only 2.7% of the whole population of Australia was born outside of Australia or Ireland or the UK. So there is a few issues around that. However, the Sydney-Melbourne rivalry thing, that's quite interesting. But let's go down to these vaults. Where are they? Let's descend down. Hopefully we might find some gold. As you come down, you already notice the temperature is quite cool. You're sort of dropping below that ground level. But as we know, Melbourne, real Melbourne, was built on gold, and all of that was held here. Before you get down into the vaults, you come into this room here, which is quite strange because you think, hang on, I thought I was going into the vaults. But no, you're actually walking into somebody's old home. You see, the Treasury Building itself had staff to look after it, and that's the main staff member, the superintendent. His name is John Maynard, and he lived in 5 rooms in this building with his wife and 8 children. 8 children. And you get to walk through where they lived. And it was his job to look after the place and ensure that the cleaners were doing their job and the place was safe, and any problems that they encountered, he was the one who was first on scene. But you get to walk through, I guess, their living room, their kitchen, their dining room. And it is quite cold before you get to walk into the vaults. Now, there are a few interesting stories about the people who did find gold and then very quickly lost it. There's this one guy, his name was Mr. Johnson. He found a whole heap of gold, and he is rumoured to have built a castle on Dandenong Road. However, within a few years, he'd lost all of his money and he was back digging in the digging fields looking for gold. With gold came crime. You see, there was a lot of, I guess, opportunistic people who were scouring the gold fields, but not only the gold fields, also the road on the way. So if you found some gold in the gold fields, how would you get it back to Melbourne? They had these gold carriers, and what you do is you get your gold that you found, you take it up to the gold commissioner's tent in the gold fields, and you'd get your receipt, and he would give you a receipt, and he would have a identical receipt, and he'd give you yours, and then you would come down to Melbourne and you'd present it. And there was only certain days of the week and certain times of the day you could actually come and collect your gold. And if you had your receipt, you would then have to describe what the gold looked like, how much gold was there, and what kind of bag that the commissioner put her in. If you couldn't do that, you forfeited your gold to the government and you missed out. So you can see there's probably a bit of room for some dodgy practices by the gold commissioner, or if you're in cahoots with some of these people, you could end up with a lot of gold yourself. Now, once you had it and you'd gone and collected it, what are you going to do with it? So there was, in about the 1860s, there was more than 200 gold buyers here in Melbourne. Crazy. But a lot of people, they would melt it down into smaller little nuggets, or they would sell it to jewellers, or they would sell it off to the highest bidder, go to an auction, something like that. A lot of the gold was actually sent back to Britain and to France and was used in coins. And then little bits of it were used, as I said, in jewellery and in gold leaf type materials. And that's what kind of happened to most of the gold. Gold fever drove everybody crazy. I mean crazy. And this museum really tells you about the history of the gold rush here in Victoria. And at one point, the population here in Melbourne got to more than 1 million people in 1880s. I think it was 1886. I could be wrong, I'm pretty sure it's 1886. That, from a mere couple of hundred people in 1835 to more than 1 million people. That is a huge immigration program, and all of those people were coming, or a lot of those people were coming to find their fortune and fame and strike it rich. Now, a lot of them did, but a lot didn't. What happened from about 1851 until the 1861, this was known as the golden decade here in Melbourne, and a lot of the buildings that were built with wood and water structures, they were pulled down and rebuilt with stone, because there was basically unlimited amount of finance coming into Melbourne. So with all these people came all this finance and all this opportunity from international lenders and financiers to try and make some money on the gold rush. And it is crazy to think all of the gold was held in these vaults. Could just imagine what the security was like. But this is what we're looking for. Eureka! We found it. This really is a remarkable museum, and I highly recommend you come check it out, and it's only 5 minutes from Flinders Street Station. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Feel free to share it, and we'll see you next time on 5 Minutes from Flinders.